Hey, team players, and welcome back. So glad to be back after the brief Super Bowl break. So much has happened since we last sat down, getting ready for obviously the upcoming season in both the future bets. Obviously, the schedules aren't out, so we can't dive into that yet, but also the fantasy implications. And this is going to be really a conversation about resetting what to look for next year, who needs what, where we're at. And Bob, I want to start with the team that's got the first pick in the Chicago Bears, because quite frankly, if I were in Chicago, would have played it very differently than how they did. Given a couple things. So recap of specifically what I'm talking about was they have Fields, they have the first pick overall, and ultimately they ended up trading Fields for basically nothing. A next year 6th-round pick, which is reports out of Pittsburgh say likely what they're going to end up paying. That could potentially become a 4th-round pick. Still not that much. And on the record, you can see me for the last 3 years saying that Fields is not an accurate quarterback and outlining a lot of the complaints about Fields from what he gives you on the field from an accuracy perspective. That being said, throughout the course of last year, he improved dramatically in the routine throws of accuracy. And he has one of the underrated requirements that's necessary in Chicago, which is a strong arm. And I don't think they're going to get that from this new kid, which will be a problem. So the reason I say I would have stuck with Fields is 2 reasons. First, this is going to sound a really weird sentence. Chicago's not as bad as they seem. They're kind of built to win now, especially the way that defense picked up the second half.
That is a weird sentence.
It is. It's a very weird sentence to say, but it's not wrong either. So you look at where they're now doing. Anytime you bring in a rookie quarterback, with the exception of about 4 of them over the last decade, you take a step back that first year. And that includes Lawrence, who was supposed to be the greatest, safest pick ever. Yeah. So what makes you think that this is going to be not a setback? Fields wasn't going to make you have a setback this season. The other thing, and this is really the bigger ticket item, you could have had the Raiders, who are prone at destroying everything, their 1st-round pick for the next 4 years. And if you look at team building, even if you would have struck out on Fields, say you brought him back and you miss, if you get the Las Vegas Raiders 1st-round pick for the next 4 years, plus all the ancillary ones that would come along with it, even if Fields blows up this year and is horrible, which 50-50 proposition, I actually think he would have done better there. Right. You would have had the Raiders' first 4 picks. You would have been able to go instantly. Boom, Fields blew it. Raiders are going to give you a top 5 pick forever. You got instant power to get the first pick in the draft next year. To me, it's incredibly short-sighted and nearsighted. And if I were Chicago, I obviously just made the argument about why I would have gone the other direction. But we got to deal with what we're at and where we're here. And first week of free agency is over, Bob. And where do you want to dive into? Because there's some teams that are really disappointing.
I want to stay a little bit on that Justin Fields topic, because it affects two teams in the pool, and it really affects a lot of other things that are being shaken down in the NFL. So one of the things, and just listening to local broadcasts around Steelers Nation here, we are hearing, hey, we've got this debate here in Pittsburgh with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. They both offer capacities in, as a passer and as a rusher. Who's the safest option here? Here in Pittsburgh, it's really tough to say how this will ultimately go down. But you can't argue against having only $5 million into 2 quarterbacks, and they are both fairly good quarterbacks to great quarterbacks when they're on their A game. Now, we haven't seen an A game Russell Wilson in a long time.
That's right.
And we know that Justin Fields' A game isn't necessarily through passing, although we did see a little bit of that with DJ Moore last year. Now,
I would put Moore is a big reason that he got better. But from the Steelers' perspective, they did about the most low risk, high return possible ever. League minimum who potentially could be an MVP or a Hall of Famer in Wilson, and a 6th-round pick for a guy who was a top 3 pick.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
a total shot in the dark, but there's no cost to them.
the Steelers have incrementally got even if we don't know what is going to happen with these two quarterbacks over the course of this next season, they are an incremental upgrade. I would say almost multiplicative to what Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph offered. And you see how much, that Tennessee paid for Mason Rudolph, and you see how much we actually have invested in Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. And it just seems that for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year, that they're trying to think, and this is why I bring this up, is that they're trying to think about their identity. And the Chicago Bears are also trying to think about their identity in that they were one of the better rushing teams last year. And we all know that when it comes to rushing, the better rushing teams, their quarterback is one of those quarterbacks that just is elite rushing the ball. Your Josh Allen,
in general,
Jackson.
There's some examples of not, but in general,
there's some
that's
examples
true.
of not. But we think about it in terms of, okay, like what is the identity of these teams moving forward? And for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I don't know if Justin Fields is going to be the identity of the Pittsburgh Steelers in the near future, but he has the capacity to be with the Pittsburgh Steelers for an extended period of time because unlike Kenny Pickett, he has shown flashes that he can be a professional quarterback, whether that is in the style of your Donovan McNabb's, Michael Vicks, or whether that's in a low grade passing-based offense with some rushing upside. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers over the last several years have not moved the ball. I mean, this has been a problem, and it was a problem that we attributed.
Russell Wilson.
It was a problem that we attributed to Matt Canada. It was a problem that we attributed to Kenny Pickett. It's a problem that we attributed to the offensive line being porous. It's a problem that we attributed to Najee Harris not being the guy. So there's a lot of things. And now with two actual, and I say that it's very important distinction, with two actual quarterbacks on the roster that aren't just sitting around. Like Mason Rudolph was a pretty good player, but is he ever going to be a guy? Like, no, not really. But he was never really given the opportunity to be the guy for an extended period of time. Now, I worry with the Pittsburgh Steelers in that what is their plan here with getting – I like both the quarterbacks, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, obviously. But I'm thinking as just a fan right now, trying to figure out, hey, what is going to be the game plan when is the transition going to happen? Because we know that a guy like Justin Fields who has that talent, you don't let that sit around very often. And you got to use it at some point. So why I bring up Justin Fields and that identity thing is because the Steelers have to figure out their new identity. Because it is very, very clear that as how they've been coached, that they want to run the ball, but that is not working to move the ball downfield. And it's the coaching game plan and the coordination of whatever's going on in the Pittsburgh Steelers has been problematic because we cannot convert third downs. We can't. We're constantly. The Pittsburgh Steelers are constantly in third and long situations, and guys like Fields and Russell Wilson, they play the type of game that aren't going to put you. That they're going to try to make room at those first and second downs instead of trying to give you that. Instead of leaving you with that third and long. Now, they also are prone to mistakes. The Steelers have been prone to mistakes over the last several years. The Steelers also don't have a lot of composite talent on the outside to allow for the flourishing of a guy like Justin Fields. And it's pretty much what Russell Wilson has been given over the last several years anyway. So for me,
I would make an argument that Russell Wilson just downgraded his receivers.
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, Jerry Jeudy has not been good for the last several years. Cortland Sutton has been
George Pickens, barring 5 highlight plays.
But so we're sitting here with, with Pittsburgh Steelers here. We're sitting here with George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth and, got rid of Deontay Johnson to get back some picks and some talent on the
So here, let me hit on that point before you jump to the next one. the identity of the Steelers, the Bears just signed up for. Both of them are doing the exact same thing this year. They're going to be running the ball and relying upon their defense.
Yeah,
in both
and
cases,
that's what I was bringing up.
They're one defensive injury away from top 5 pick because you're going to be relying, unless Fields takes off here, which is possible. I don't think there's a chance in hell Wilson will. But if Fields takes off, you might be able to score points. But both of them are just going to say, hand the ball off and go there. This trade of Fields simultaneously did 2 major things for my personal fantasy board. The first is it took Fields down to out of the top 8 picks, out of the top 12 quarterbacks, just for the simple fact
yeah, I would agree with that.
I mean, so it's taken that, and also Khalil Herbert just skyrocketed up the list.
Well,
Moore got downgraded, and Khalil went up.
DeAndre Swift went there, so we've got a.
Swift was given the world last year and didn't do it.
Right,
Herbert never goes away.
We've got another running back backlog, and the Chicago Bears also just picked up Keenan Allen. So now you've got Keenan Allen, you've got DJ Moore, and the Chicago Bears without Justin Fields, we're still there. We're a rushing team. According to stats from Pro Football Reference, they ranked second total rushing.
Well, part of that is Fields himself running, though.
Right. But Fields only accounted for so many yards, so you've got to take that into consideration as well. So when we think about these top rushing offenses, Baltimore Ravens, Chicago Bears, Niners, Cardinals, Lions, you look at it and you say, okay, Pittsburgh Steelers is sitting at 13. When you look at a guy like Caleb Williams coming out of college, he can make throws. He can move the ball down the field, but he's
going to be a bust. I'm calling it here right now. Caleb Williams will be a bust.
And this is for any young quarterback, really. As we sit here in armchair quarterback, a lot of this stuff, and get into it preemptively, and we say things like, okay, does he have the mental toughness? Does he have the ability to play a full season because the college game is different than the NFL?
He doesn't have the arm strength to win in Chicago,
right? But the other thing too is that, like you just said, the talent physically. So mentally, is he prepared? Physically is prepared. And when we look at these top ranked quarterbacks and they're going to teams that are very, very problematic or have had problems in the future, and you're sitting here and the top 3 teams in the NFL draft this year is the Patriots, the Commanders, and the Bears. And it's really hard to turn an identity around from that 1, 2, and 3 position. When we think of quarterback success from the draft, rarely in the last probably like 15 years, rarely have we seen that number 1, number 2 be the guy outside of, like Eli Manning, right? You are just
you can only really make the argument that it's happened. The common thread between the rare argument is the team that earned that first pick had a real fluke disaster. That's what happened with Luck in Indianapolis. That team was really a winning team, but because Peyton wasn't there, it fell apart. You can make the same argument with Cam Newton the year he arrived in Carolina. That team just returned to winning ways with Cam Newton. The Redskins have no idea what winning football is.
Right.
You can make an argument the Patriots still might, but that window might have also closed. Arizona has no idea. You can make an argument that the Chargers do. So, that being said, the Chargers are taking a receiver, and Marvin Harrison Jr. in with Herbert throwing him the ball is my rookie of the year selection already.
I'm gonna just in the last 15 years, I'm just gonna list the top 3 quarterbacks drafted. And just for before we get into these other teams here, so we can.
The thing is, I gave you just such a rare NFL example for it to work. It doesn't happen.
So the one example we got C.J. Stroud this past year at 2, right? Then you've got maybe Trevor Lawrence in 2021 at 1. You have Joe Burrow at number 1 with the Bengals in 2020.
He legitimately turned a losing franchise around himself.
Okay, then you have. I'm not going to say Kyler Murray at number 1 overall. Baker Mayfield did not turn the Browns around in 2018,
It
although
took 2 years. Yeah.
he made them better. Wasn't, fantastic. Patrick Mahomes in 2017 was drafted 10th overall.
Mm-hmm.
Trubisky was number 2. Jared Goff was number 1 overall. He did fairly well there with the Rams.
Mm-hmm. Again, in his second year.
Winston, 2015. Blake Bortles, 2014.
Mm-hmm.
EJ Manuel was 16th overall in 2013. 2012.
Yeah, so the common thread here is that you can't expect them to turn around. You can also make the argument, though, that Chicago isn't as bad as most of those teams, which, again, just goes back to the point where if I were the Bears, I 100% would have just taken every single dollar and
I agree with that.
out of the Raiders.
But the point
that being said, the Raiders are at 13th.
I agree with you.
They don't have Jimmy G. We can do an entire season on the Raiders.
This is what I wanted to say is about the Bears' identity is that if the Bears were concerned about Caleb Williams or their identity or anything like that, they would not have gotten rid of Fields. But the thing is that when we say, oh yeah, you just sit behind a quarterback and learn from that quarterback, Justin Fields and Caleb Williams will never learn from one another. They are completely opposite quarterbacks. So the Bears were in a situation where they should have traded him earlier. They should have gotten the most that they could have gotten out of him earlier. But with all the movement of the
the thing is that the only other suitor was Atlanta, and the second they got Cousins, there was no one to pay for.
But this could have happened towards the end of the last season. Like these things, people are thinking about these things prior, and you get something on the board. But when free agency rocks out and you have all these quarterbacks already going, you're then just taking the less of everything that you could possibly think of, and they basically wait And comparatively too, Joe, this is the thing I always think about with trades like this is that they took Fields, what was it, 11th overall, was it?
I think it was higher than that.
Let me see. They took Fields 11th overall, and he was the 4th quarterback taken, 11th overall. So they hadn't gotten a winning season with him. They basically wasted that, giving up on him so soon. They basically wasted that 11th pick. The Steelers basically wasted that 20th pick, but wasting an 11th pick is a little worse than wasting the 20th pick. And thinking about the players that could have made Chicago better that year, you've got a plethora of talent that are sitting around there, and you're saying, okay, well, I'm just going to give up and I'm just going to go and get. Granted, the trades and stuff that they did with Carolina to get these picks and packages, that is, something to be said there. But you're looking at players that they could have drafted. They could have drafted Micah Parsons, Rashawn Slater, Zaven Collins, Jalen Phillips.
Yeah, no, it was a bad decision then. But you look at it from the fantasy standpoint. I downgrade Keenan Allen being there, not because necessarily the fact that.
But I do think they're going to shift their identity to a more passing offense.
See, I don't think you can do that with a rookie and expect anything successful.
But you don't get rid of Justin Fields if that's not your plan for the future. Because
they want to be a more pocket presence. That's fine.
Exactly.
That's part of why I'm upping on Herbert. And yes, I admit in this I don't give any stock in Swift. He's dead to me. There's a truth to there. But I believe that they're going to end up being a more running team. I still love Kmet's game. And like I said, I don't think the Bears are as bad as their 6 wins last year were. I do expect them to get better.
I didn't think their defense was
still not a playoff team.
I like their defense. I thought their defense was.
Yeah, but I don't see it as an over 500 team.
Now, Joe, we're going to move on from Chicago. I agree with you that I don't think it's an over 500 team. I think that Chicago is going to have some issues this year because there's a lot of teams around them getting better, and we'll see what the rookie does. But what I want to talk about is a team that basically imploded on itself as the season went on. What?
There's a couple of those.
basically imploded on itself as the season went on. And now you look at their roster offensively, and essentially it is a shell of what it was, but that might not be a bad thing. And I'm talking specifically about the Los Angeles Chargers.
Oh, I was going a different team there. By the way, I was going to hate on you guys again, Raiders, because he described you.
So the Los Angeles Chargers are sitting here now, and they basically got rid of their whole offense.
Mike Williams and Allen are gone right now.
It's getting old. It's getting injured. They're getting rid of it. So now the new look, as of this moment in time, the new look skill position players are Herbert, Edwards, Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnson, Darius Davis, and Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst. Their offensive line, I guess ESPN doesn't want to update the injuries. They're all injured still, it seems. There's three out of the 5.
You don't update the injury reports until you have to.
3 out of the 5 look injured.
So here's the thing. I was on the record. I still believe it. Quentin Johnson was my favorite rookie last year. I still think that he is someone worth relying upon. He's got size. He's should have been the Mike Williams replacement. Just Mike Williams didn't get hurt last year. Odds on that you thought they would have. So I like Quentin Johnson. He's one of my guys I think will be reliable. I think that pretty much universally you're going to be penciling Marvin Harrison Jr. into that roster. The only team that could mess that up is the Charger, or is Arizona. Don't get me wrong, Marvin Harrison Jr. will look great with anyone. I just personally want him with Herbert. Arizona has a lot of holes. They just got rid of Hollywood, so you can make an argument Harrison's going to 4 instead of 5. Either way, a receiver is going to the Chargers in the first round. The Chargers are really a gilded empire. They had 3 stars and no depth, but unlike the team across town, they can't develop from within. It was painfully obvious that no one respected the coach. They stopped going for him, and that was part of the implosion. Now, we look at what they've got here. With Harbaugh, that is the primary thing they were trying to change. Build a team. The thing is, with head coach transfers, the best way to go about it is you strengthen the opposite of what your head coach is great at. And here's the case in point example. Last year, Houston, in their offseason, was entering with the second worst defense in the NFL. They signed a defensive coach, and with the exception of one premier draft pick, did not address their defense at all. They just let the coach upgrade their current players. So what did Houston do? They transformed their offense.
Well, they got Will Anderson, which is
I'm saying Will Anderson was the primary pick, but he was still hurt for a lot of the year. So as you look at what they did, just from coaching and scheme, they went from 30 and lower to middle of the pack. And if you're the Chargers, I would go with that exact same thing. Let Harbaugh rebuild your defense, because as we look at it right now, if Joey Bosa plays, which really needs to be the statement of his career, they have 2 players worth noting on their defense. Derwin James and Bosa.
To your point, Joe.
So my point is their offseason should be all offense and let Harbaugh rebuild the defense.
I want to tell you why I kind of brought this team up, because it's another team with a shift in identity. LA Football Network follows the Rams, follows the Chargers, all that stuff. When you have a head coach in Harbaugh and you sign guys like Gus Edwards, and you sign players that are primarily blocking-based players, especially in the tight end position that they did, and this is from LA Football Network, and it's not, I mean, it's been reported, but it's not any secret, is that the Chargers have had a problem for years about finishing games.
Yes.
And we have seen this. We've talked about this ad nauseum, that the Chargers can't win the big one because they can't finish. And it's been a Chargers problem for the last 15 years. No matter how good their offense is, the defense can't finish. No matter how good the defense is, the offense can't finish it.
Yeah.
What LA Football brought up is the point that there is this shift in thinking to physicality.
They need it.
When you hire Harbaugh, you go for Gus Edwards, and you pick up guys that are blocking-based players.
Mm-hmm.
You are telling the world that we are going to seek to run the ball to open up our pass, not pass the ball to open up our run.
Mm-hmm.
And
the left side of that offensive line was their first round picks 2 and 3 years ago.
And finesse guys like Eckler don't have a place in that. Guys like Keenan Allen don't have a place in that.
See, but Mike Williams does.
Mike Williams does, but if you're hurt, you can't be physical. So
it's true.
When you look at this and you say, okay, what are we rebuilding for? Well, Quentin Johnston has this opportunity to now show up and play, but the main drag on Johnston was that he couldn't hold on to the ball. Well, Harbaugh might not require him to do that as much. He's going to require him to do it, but it's not. But it could be that he's okay going into this season with a guy like this as a number 2, number 1 guy, and develop him. Like you're saying, development is important, and Harbaugh is the type of coach that is a developer. He's going to make the players better. And that is one thing about the Chargers, that even though this team basically imploded down the stretch, it felt like, even though they were playing fairly okay, and just blowing up the system and just getting rid of this talent, you're basically telling this division, well, we want to win, and this is how we're going to win. And we got to find the players that can do that. And when you look in free agency, Gus Edwards that they picked up is a great low-level option to do that with. We saw that with the Ravens. They didn't go out there and get Derrick Henry, who is a good option to do that with too. They went a little bit younger.
Gus Edwards is not going to be their opening day starter.
No, but when you think about it, it's a great option. He's a finisher. He's designed to get in the end zone. He's designed to push the ball on 3rd and 2, 3rd and 4, something like that. And the Chargers needed that. They didn't have that. And now they do. And then you look at Herbert. Herbert's still Herbert. As long as you are able to protect Herbert, which has been a problem for the Chargers,
yes,
you are going to be able to be in games. And when you look at the defense, like you said, if you can develop guys like Bosa and Mack, and you can continue to get the best out of them all the time, and then you can take those other guys and turn them into something, you got a team. You got something. Even though the depth chart is not filled out, you've got a team that could really go places.
I do. I said we say this every year. They're one of the most talented rosters in the league. Now they actually have a coach who can finish.
But
I do believe that you're getting a receiver and a running back as their first and second picks, and then probably a center as their third would realistically be the guess.
And the question too here lies, Joe, is that they're sitting there really early in the draft, and you're asking yourself, okay, what are they gonna do?
They're either taking Marvin Harrison Jr. or the other receiver.
But
it's a no doubt.
That's
they're taking a receiver.
Is he going to be there? If he's not there, they go offensive line. If somebody is there, you could. The reason I say
I can honestly see the Raiders trading with the Cardinals to try to get a quarterback, and Harrison being there at 5. I still do not see a scenario where Vegas does not break the bank to go up and get a quarterback. Because when you look at this draft, not to make it all about the draft previews, we certainly will do this.
I mean, it's part of the game.
But if you look at the draft here, your first 3 picks, Chicago, Washington, Patriots, are all quarterback. You know it already. It's 100% happening. Arizona, probably not a quarterback because they've already committed to Murray, which, again, people say things and then literally will change their mind 20 minutes later. As Steelers said, they were all in on Kenny, and now he's an Eagle. So the only team you know for sure is sitting there that's not taking a quarterback is the Chargers. Arizona still might. The Giants should. The Falcons probably aren't because they just signed him. The Bears on the second go-around are not going to be taking a quarterback. So you look at the Giants. If you're Vegas, you can go to 4 and guarantee yourself. Or you can hope that the Giants still believe in Daniel Jones. I mean, that's a gross sentence. You really want to bank your future?
Who can believe in Daniel Jones? The Giants?
The Giants. Like, I can see that if you give me one of these top 5 studs sitting there, Giants could easily scoop it up. Not to mention sitting the fact there that you also have the Vikings, who are this exact same problem.
Yes.
Picking before you. So the Raiders and Denver also needs a quarterback. So all 3 of these teams are 11 through 13, and there's not a whole lot of trading partners before you get to the Giants, who could ruin everything for everyone, which to me means Arizona is the trading.
Okay, so
go get some picks.
So there's two ways of thinking this here. So you could have the Broncos end up moving up. Okay.
I think any of the 3 of them can move up. Want to move up.
But in terms of who's going to move up, who could take, I mean, if I were Arizona, I would be selling that spot for the most I could possibly take, because everybody's pegging you as a wide receiver, either Neighbors, Odunze, or Marvin Harrison. If
you look at the other teams that are between there and 13, Giants, Titans, Falcons, Bears, again, Jets, the exception of maybe the Jets, you're going to get the number 2 receiver in the draft and get all this extra capital. Like, to me, that's worth it. And if Harrison does go at 4, if I'm the Chargers, I'm going to use the exact same logic. I didn't get Harrison. I rolled the dice by staying here. Now I'll move it.
Correct. And that's what I was saying, is that, even if the Cardinals take a wide receiver up there, the Chargers can trade out of that pick, because guess what? The Vikings might want something. The Giants might want to trade up a spot. The Tennessee Titans might want to move up for Joe Alt if they have reason to believe that the Giants would take him. There's a lot of movement that can happen. And, I wouldn't write it out of the question too, Joe, that the Patriots might trade out of that spot too, because there is
100% need a quarterback.
Yes, but there's a lot of talk around the league that there is a lot of coaches in the league that like J.J. McCarthy. And J.J. McCarthy is going to cost a little bit less. And if you can pick up picks, that is usually what the New England Patriots do. Granted, that's just something to think about. But it could be that maybe the Vikings put together a package, move up to 3.
I don't want to be a total Debbie Downer, Bob, but Boston is one of the worst fan bases in the world. And they have been pampered for 2 decades. They are not going to be able to stomach another less than 5 win season.
Oh, I agree with you.
That pick is being a quarterback.
I agree with you.
And they are not moving out of it. And it better be great. Not like there's like pressure on that.
I agree with you that pick 1, 2, and 3 are all going to be quarterbacks, but
I'm saying there's no way Boston doesn't do it.
I am thinking that something, because when we look at what the Patriots need a lot. The Patriots are a team that really realistically got worse last year. They were okay the year before, and they got worse, and there's a lot of problems. And when you look at, can you pull up who they actually picked up in free agency this year?
So the Patriots roster, as we sit right now in time, it's probably easier to go through the roster. I think it gives you a more complete picture. So looking at them New England Patriots, you still have Juju as your projected number 1 receiver. They brought back Bourne. Douglas, they don't even run a slot, but Douglas DeMarco is their slot. Their offensive line, for all of their problems, is not one of them. Currently, their quarterback is Jacoby Brissett. They obviously still have Ramore. But when you look at the rest Ramondre, sorry. There's Stevenson at the running back. They also picked up Gibson as their backup. It's the Patriots. They got to have 5 running backs. And Harris wasn't that bad, Kevin Harris. So when I look at them, they're still running this 2 tight end set with Hunter, and now they brought in Hooper, who, again, I'm not in love with Hooper, but they brought him in. So this team, you can make an argument that Jacoby Brissett could just eat one. Is what your argument is.
Yeah.
Go pick up a ton of picks and rebuild a defense. But the issue is this defense isn't broken. This defense actually is pretty good.
Well, it was.
Well, I would argue it has great foundational pieces. particularly Christian
Was
Gonzalez,
good.
who I love. Now, they need a pass rusher.
Like
There's
I said,
no
they
doubt about it.
underperformed last year. They underperformed
They
last year.
underperformed when they got on the field for 40 minutes a game. They got burnt out. And that happens to any team. If you're relying on the defense, you better be able to run a ball. And that is, to me, why if I'm looking at the Patriots, I need a quarterback. Because in terms of nest, the nest is kind of built. Hand the ball to Ramondre. It's a good running system. Do you have an elite receiver? No. But you have a second-round pick for that. Do you have – you also have the ability to still go get Mike Williams. You know, you put Mike Williams and quarterback out with Juju doing the underneath short routes, it's a manageable offense that can really take over. And quite frankly, if I'm any of those top three teams, which includes the Bears, I know they got Keenan Allen already, but I wouldn't really be opposed to having Keenan Allen, Juju, and more, or correction, Mike Williams and more. I think Mike Williams is one of the most underrated receivers out there. If I were the Bills, I would want him immediately. But again, I have a lot of love for Mike Williams. I get that both fantasy and on the field. But when I look at overall here, the Patriots aren't a bad destination. And if I were them, I 100% would take the quarterback. I would take the security, saying, "Hey, we're never getting this pick again. Like we're the Patriots, dude. We're never getting this high again. Get the most important position on the field." And I understand your argument. Cash in. Get all of the Raiders chips. You'll have a top 5 pick forever.
I'm just wondering this year, and this is just kind of what for the New England Patriots, and when we talk about the difference from last year to this year, like I mean from 2022 to 2023. In 2022, we were talking about the New England Patriots potentially making the playoffs. That's how good the defense was playing, in spite of what the offense was doing with Matt Patricia, because he's garbage. But when you look at last year, they didn't really the scoreboard wasn't something that you wanted to watch if you were a Patriots fan at all.
I get that, but if you're on a first-year coach, it's a lot safer to take the quarterback with your first pick.
But I'm not sure.
You buy yourself more time.
I'm not sure at 3 they're in the position to take the right quarterback for this team. When the reason I went back to look at the quarterback,
that kid from LSU would be good there. There's no
who's coming out 1, 2, and 3. Oftentimes there is by draft analysts and by Mel Kiper and other people of that ilk, you have players being pushed that really don't have the
it's happening at 1-1. I already know it.
Well, yeah,
Williams is an example.
But people are being pushed that don't realistically deserve that push, but because they need like a face of the draft and they need to market all of this stuff about the draft to people, is that they're pushing guys that are good enough, but being put into bad situations is going to not make their best components shine. And that's similar to the Justin Fields dilemma that we were talking about, the Kenny Pickett dilemma that we were talking about. Kenny Pickett may or may not be good, but he wasn't good for the Steelers. So I don't think he's a good quarterback at all, but he wasn't good for the Steelers for sure.
He's not.
But you got Caleb Williams, you have Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels seems to be, even though Caleb Williams has done a little bit, Jaden Daniels seems to be that all-around quarterback that people really want. And number 3, Drake May. Drake May, he is a guy in that vein of Mitch Trubisky that we have seen good games and we've seen some inconsistency issues. And when inconsistency issues are not continue to be a problem for a quarterback, we have what we see in the NFL right now. We have a bunch of, this was quarterback carousel this year, of quarterbacks being thrown around because consistency was an issue. People thought that they were going to be good, and they ended up not being good. You have a guy in J.J. McCarthy, coached by Harbaugh, who logistically may or may not be the best quarterback in the class, but is the best quarterback in the class actually the best player in the draft?
You still haven't said the best quarterback in the class yet, Bob.
I'm not saying his name because I don't like him, but the fact remains is that the best player in this year's draft is probably sitting at offensive tackle in Joe Alt, or it's sitting
the best player in your draft, Marvin Harris Jr.,
or it's sitting at wide receiver at Marvin Harrison Jr. But if I were the New England Patriots and I'm sitting at 3, if Drake May's not my guy, then I'm trading out of that spot, and I'm going to go down and I'm going to accumulate because I need.
You're going to hope that Phoenix is still on the board when you trade down.
I'm going to make sure that this draft is a draft that I'm going to not waste because the opportunity is here. You're right. I'm never going to. New England is not the type of team that has that picked off it.
Here's my thing. You put Marvin Harrison Jr. on this Patriots team, it's still a 4-win team. You put a real quarterback on this team, you have a chance.
But the thing is, you have to have a real quarterback, and I'm not 100% sure that Drake May is the quarterback that you.
Well, I don't think any rookie is. But my point is, next year when you enter into 2025, you have something to build around and believe in. I still think, like I said, I'm not holding this back. The best quarterback in this draft is going to end up being Penix. There's no way around that.
He's. We'll talk about that another day. But to go along this of quarterback needy teams, we're going to land on Minnesota next. And Minnesota is definitely an interesting team because this is a team that not too far gone from a winning franchise that, was competing for, playoff spots and competing for division titles. And they are another team that basically exploded and
but I don't get why. For everything we're saying, they were right there on the cusp.
And got rid of most of the talent in free agency here. And they're basically starting over again, Joe. And so
which you don't normally see in a coach's third year.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
It's concerning. And the reason I bring them up next is because they're a team that many analysts in the draft world are pegging as a team that will move up into that top 1, 2, 3, 4 area if they can to get a quarterback of the future. But we sit here and Kirk Cousins was winning games for them. Kirk Cousins was performing admirably, but Kirk Cousins is old. And so they've got talent at wide receiver.
Yeah, they just never trust him coming back from the injury. I get it. But they also said they wanted him, and Kirk's a mercenary, and he got paid more by Atlanta.
Now,
I can't fault Kirk for doing that.
No, and now they've got on the offense
Sam Darnold.
They've got their rookie and Jaron Hall from last year. They've got Nick Mullins. They've got Ty Chandler, Gaskin, Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is still full of talent. He's a great player. He's better than what they were trotting out last year.
True.
And you've got
Miles Gaskin buried on that roster.
And you have 3 elite. You have 3 elite receiving threats on this team in Jefferson, Addison, and Hawkinson. It would be silly if you went into this season with Jaron Hall. It would be absolutely silly if you are the Minnesota Vikings and you walk into the season and you say, Jaron Hall is my starting quarterback. Now, for everything that I said about New England not wanting a quarterback and maybe that not being their guy, a guy like Drake May, who, inconsistent, whatever, he could be the guy for Minnesota because Minnesota's already set up to win. Minnesota's offense is already there.
Let me throw something at you because I think that this has a chance. I think that Minnesota is a strong contender for this because of the free agent quarterbacks left, to me, there's only 2 that's even worth talking about that could be an opening day starter. And that is Tannehill and Wentz. Now, yes, things with both of them have had brighter days. But Wentz is still in his 20s. He has shown that in a system, he can be successful. With these options at receiver, and you also sign him for basically nothing right now. Like, it's a no-risk scenario. You can have a Wentz-Darnold battle because they're basically the same guy. I would be okay with those 2 slugging it out, knowing that all you got to do is kind of throw the ball far and J. Jeff will take care of you. Like, this isn't like New England, where the receivers are not going to help you. The receiving core in Minnesota can save a bad quarterback. You can. If I were the Vikings, I would consider signing Wentz because again, he's going to be basically cheap as hell. Bringing him in, give him one of these 2-year deals that basically says we're giving you a chance to revitalize your career. If you don't, you don't. And we're going to use this first round pick to make sure that you don't get ever sacked again. Because the cool thing about Minnesota is their right side of the line is second round draft picks.
So I'm good on that. But
I would go either edge rusher or tackle if I'm Minnesota and bring in Wentz. It solves a lot of their problems in the short term. And they're in a much better situation than the 3 teams around them that are quarterback hungry and probably more desperate
Here's
to
why
spend
they
checks.
don't do that. Here's why they don't do that, Joe. Is underrated thing happened. The Vikings did go out and get a second first-round pick, just so you're aware of that. You might not have seen it, but they got it from Houston. So the Vikings right now are sitting at 2 first-round picks. You go out and you get a journeyman in Sam Darnold, who isn't the answer. He won't be the answer. He'll never be the answer. But he's a guy who knows how to play football. He's a guy who is probably good at coaching players.
But the point is you can't have him as anointed as your starter.
Listen. He's not going to be. What I'm saying is these moves are indicative of a team that is going to draft a quarterback in the first round. You do not go out there, don't go out there and have 2 first-round picks plus pick up a guy like Sam Darnold if you don't plan on drafting a quarterback in the first round.
See, I can make an argument with the Vikings.
Speaking, that doesn't happen.
See, I make the argument much stronger. Bring in Wentz. Let the 2 of them have a camp battle.
You can't bring in both Wentz and Darnold because then you'll just turn into garbage. It will just be garbage.
I'm saying that Wentz and Darnold, the winner of that battle, can be good enough if you go with we're now going to get the best edge rusher and the best actually they don't even need, they got a left tackle 2 years ago.
Fair enough.
You give me a left tackle a true edge rusher and use both of those picks on the defense as the Vikings. Now you can slow down Detroit and the entire game comes to handing the ball off to whoever your second round running back is or third round running back.
Okay, I'm there with you. I think that is a valuable thing that they could end up doing. I think
and Bob, here's the thing, because I think the price tag that Denver and Vegas are going to cut, Minnesota won't be willing to match. They just showed with Cousins, who they knew what they had in him, that they weren't willing to. Now, granted, the fact that he was rehabbing there might have been they did know what they have in him. That part, I guess, could also be articulated as well with the Vikings. But as I look at this, if I'm Minnesota, I'm okay with Wentz. I'm okay with a Wentz-Darnold battle.
That's
because
fine.
The rest of that offense is stacked.
That's fine. And you could easily see the Vikings being poised, and this could be the year that, say they don't trade up and get that quarterback. They could use both of those picks on offensive line. They could use one of those picks on an offensive lineman. And
you look at their actions this offseason. They brought in Van Ginkel from Miami.
Right. That's what I'm saying, is that all of the moves that they've been making feel like it's pointing you. It could be a red herring, but it feels like it's pointing you in the direction that they're looking for a franchise quarterback, and bringing in 2 journeymen to compete with Jaren Hall is not what the plan is. So moving on from
Minnesota, and this will go to your next point here. Minnesota is one of these teams that's very good at projecting what the draft will be and seeing where the value is.
Right.
If this really does end up being before their pick at 13, 5 quarterbacks go, they're going to get tremendous defensive value at corner
and it could be too,
and edge rusher.
It could
which
be
is crazy.
That they might go out at 13 and take JJ McCarthy if he's sitting there, and then use their other pick to do whatever they want to do.
They want a corner and edge rusher.
It is a possibility. So moving forward from one quarterback starved team to another, we should say.
Which one?
We've got to look at these teams in New York, okay? Both the Giants and the Jets at the same time. We have, 2 organizations that seem to be pointing in different directions. The Jets.
Yeah, the one's probably getting the first pick in the draft next year, and the other one has Aaron Rodgers.
The Jets with Aaron Rodgers, they were not, Rodgers got hurt at the beginning of the season last year. He's coming back, hopefully in full force. The Jets could be back to being a possible contender for this upcoming season. And the Giants are sitting here with Daniel Jones for another year. And
they just signed Drew Lock, though, Bob. That could be a pressure.
And it seems like it's not going in the right direction. But then you're also sitting here where you're looking at the Giants and just thinking about the NFC East overall. You got Philly making some moves, and you've got the Dallas Cowboys doing nothing. So, Joe, talk to us a little bit about the Giants here and in comparison with the Jets, or even in comparison to the teams in their division, because the Giants going out there and getting Brett Burns, but losing a lot of stuff. But is this addition by subtraction? Is this addition with addition? Or is just having Daniel Jones just so toxic on this team that it's just not going to work no matter what you put around him?
Well, let's back this up. Since 2020, so the last 5 drafts, you can make an argument, and based upon their roster right now, they only have Andrew Thomas. Now, granted, they've had more than one first-round pick each year. They've had Andrew Thomas is still slated to be a starter, and they have Thibodeau. They just signed in a right tackle who they paid a gobble amount of money, which essentially is saying that they believe Evan Neal isn't going to work out. They bought 2 new guards, and they bought a center who may or may not be able to beat out the second-round pick from last year. So this is a team that is basically said, we suck at drafting. And which is why they keep drafting where they are. Saquon Barkley was literally able to save this problem. So when you look at this, they have holes everywhere. So does Carolina. So I don't want to be slam dunking these guys as the first overall pick in 25. But if I'm the Giants, and I know this about myself, there's no way in hell I'm trading up from 6 because I'm not giving up next year's first round pick. It could be
right. You can't.
You can't. That being said, at least 3, if not 4 quarterbacks are off the board, and Marvin Harrison Jr. is also off the board. But when you come up on 6, that's pretty much unknown.
So you take the best offensive lineman there?
No, I would take the best corner edge rusher. Give me a stable to build my defense around. Either give me a true shutdown corner, because they got Deonte Banks last year, who the jury's still out on the second-year guy to see if he's a bust or not. But they got Deonte Banks. He's projected to be, I think it was the 4th corner taken, maybe the 3rd out of Maryland last year. Okay. You put one next to him, that's going to be a stud. You now have, Sauce is across town. We have our version of Sauce. Or you give me an edge rusher to be next to Thibodeau. You can build yourself, which is the direction I actually think they would go. You build yourself like those Super Bowl teams that were all about the pass rushing and just basically then hold the ball on the other side. If I were them, that's the direction I would go, get the first edge rusher off the board at 6. Because that's really what their choice is going to be. That's how I would approach this as the Giants. Across town with the Jets, it's all or nothing win now. I mean, you did this trade for Rodgers. It has to be everything you can possibly give him, below your load to make it happen. They bought the left half of their offensive line. It's going to be replaced by free agency. They also bought Moses, who's I'm not exactly thrilled with at right tackle. But again, you'd be looking at 3 brand new linemen. They have a first rounder or second rounder at center and guard. The biggest problem I have with this team is they don't have a number 2. And this is one of the teams you put Mike Williams on, you just have yourself a very happy quarterback. Garrett Wilson has himself a better life. And that's the direction I would go with you. I would continue the free agency bucket. And when you look at the amount of money that the Jets have, the Jets are sitting here right in the middle of the road at 18 with $17 million left on the cap in cap space right now. So you'd have to be a little creative with your contract, but you could make it happen with Mike Williams. And I believe that. Also, let me put this out clearly. Mike Williams is by far and away the best receiver left in the free agency world at wide receiver. I want to make that clear. I get that Tyler Boyd's out there, but really, it's Mike Williams, and then do you want Beckham? Do you want Michael Thomas?
No.
Do you want Renfro?
No.
Mikael Hardman? Like, Mike Williams is the only one left. And to me, there's really 3 teams that should be vying for him that have a chance of making a run now. The Jets and the Bills are 2 of them. Knowing that the other one is in your division and knowing where the Jets are at, I would rather, especially having the defensive coach, I would rather lock down, sign Mike Williams, and then use that 10th pick overall to supplement your defense. Because you have a chance of saying, hey, we're already a bunch of studs over here. Why do we need you? And you could be looking at the second corner off the board. Pairing that with Sauce, dude, that's a team you can't throw on. And Rodgers is going to make you throw because Rodgers is going to put up some points. That is a possibility that if I'm the Jets would be really exciting because aside from Sauce, this is the rest of the corners on their roster. Brandon Eccles.
Wow.
DJ Reed and Ty Haynes.
Joe, you know.
I think number 10's a corner. If I were the Jets, it's absolutely what I would do. And I would do that because it's a position of need that can start on day one. It's not crazy. It's not out of the world. You just cut a check to bring in Mike Williams and boom. Well, they're clearly not afraid of injury risk.
Well, I've said this about the Jets, and I've said this really about any team that has a star cornerback, is that cornerbacks don't last long in the league. I think they last less than a running back in my mind. But it doesn't mean that they last less in terms of talent, but like their eliteness only is about like a 1 or 2 year window, maybe 3.
A lot of turnover at that position, yes.
And so
that's why you need 2 of them.
You can still be good, but it's problematic. And so I'm always a person that would love to have a team with depth at the cornerback position that they can continue to move things in and out and taking, even if your stud cornerback is out, you're still not taking yourself out of the game for any one reason. So I think everything you said about the Jets and the Giants is pretty fair. And now I want to talk a little bit on the board here about some teams that have a lot of needs, but their primary needs are on the offensive line. So we're speaking mainly here of Seattle, Tennessee, Washington, the Niners, New England. We won't go back to them. Vegas, I know you've been chomping at the bit to talk about them. Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Detroit. Now, some of those teams are better than others. Some of those needs aren't as glaring as others. Is there any team out of that list? I know you want to talk about Vegas. Any team out of that list that feels close to you that maybe 1 or 2 players will help fill the void from the draft? Or is it just such an uphill battle, notwithstanding injuries, if it's such an uphill battle for these teams to get better in the draft, seeing as free agency is just about over,
Yeah.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, if you haven't signed a guy now, if you're bringing him in later, it's probably because you had cap stuff, depth stuff, or you're waiting for something in the draft.
Yeah. So just to go real quick, you're not going to be getting, to your point here, a stud here in free agency, especially interior. They got bought early. There was a shortage of them in a lot of teams.
That's essentially over.
Yeah. You're going to be bringing in guys who might win a camp battle that you just want to have on your roster, so I'm not needy in the draft, which I also agree with that philosophy. Sign someone cheaper towards this part of free agency. It's not going to be a lot of guaranteed money, so therefore it's not a lot of money if you got to cut them. And then if they win the camp spot or the draft didn't fall our way, boom, you just got lucky into a starting gig. I am not opposed to that strategy at all. I would go out there and say that I don't think New England has as big of an offensive line threat as some of those other ones. Seattle absolutely is an offensive need help. That's a fact. But when we look at this, they also are in quarterback hell. They just haven't admitted that to themselves yet
Mhm.
either.
Mhm.
So Seattle, I think, is a team that is going to be drafting in the top 10, possibly top 5 next year. I think that you're looking at a very bad, unfortunate last year for Mr. Carroll.
Mhm.
So, and also, I don't want to talk about the Raiders. I just know the thing about the Raiders is this. They need a quarterback. They are in a city that requires you to have a spectacle. And they're a team that believes in spectacles. And they
Mhm.
will blow their load to do it. So I don't think there's anything in Las Vegas to build around at this point. They know they're imploding. And that's why I would have been so excited if I was the Bears to get their next 4 years of first round picks. That being said, we look here, there's a glut of teams that you just mentioned there. The Titans. You didn't say Atlanta. I would
I said
include
Seattle, Titans, Washington, Niners,
Washington
New
needs
England,
basically everything.
Vegas,
So
Kansas City,
the thing
Cincinnati,
with
Baltimore.
Washington, obviously they're going quarterback at 2. They're
Mhm.
taking anyone they want, not named Williams, basically, right? So that they need a lineman. They're not going to take it there too, and it's not a great nest. There's no way when you look at Washington and say, "Oh, this is a great place to land."
Joe, I've got a
Doesn't
quick question for you before you continue that.
Mhm.
And this is just a question that I think a lot of fans have and a lot of people think about, obviously a lot, is and I alluded to it a little bit earlier. When you have teams that don't have good nests and they
Mhm.
go out and try to get a quarterback in their nest as the first piece,
Mhm.
rather than building the interior, then building around, and then going out and getting a quarterback. Will whatever Washington does, will whatever quarterback that goes to Washington be successful in their second year, third year, or will they not even be around, or will they be treated in the way that Justin Fields has been treated, insofar as you didn't allow me to succeed?
Mhm.
I mean, Justin Fields did succeed to a degree, but like a lot of these young quarterbacks are in situations where you didn't allow me to succeed. Like Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson's not a great quarterback, but
Mhm.
but by no means
Still a
was
second pick overall.
but by no means was his situation excellent. Um, Joe Burrow, we knew Joe Burrow was good, but they put a nest around him. He had
Yeah,
pieces around him,
Higgins was
so
already there. Yeah.
so he was able to be successful. Trevor Lawrence had to basically build the success. There's pieces, but you have to build this. So the question is that if I'm a Washington fan and I'm sitting here and I just want you to put on a Washington fan
Mhm.
hat for a moment. If I'm sitting here and I'm saying, okay, I'm looking at a guy like Joe Alt, who could be that kind of, I won't say Joe Thomas level, but like there's a feeling amongst people that Joe Alt is a very, 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 very good and could be very good for a long time type of tackle, or offensive lineman. And offensive linemen bust a lot. There's a lot of
Mhm.
bust that you could say, but are the is a guy like Jaden Daniels in a position to be successful with the organization that Washington has set forth amongst them? Or would you, even though it's not sexy, go out there and grab the most elite or close to elite prospect that you can at the line position, and then try to get a quarterback maybe a little bit later, like Penix or somebody like that? What is
So,
your opinion? Like, do you want that flashy pick, even though even though you feel it won't be successful? I mean, they've done this before multiple times.
so quarterback's the most dependent position on the field. Period. It is. It requires upon everyone else. That is a given. The other thing is that yes, some people are able to come up and pick it up immediately, and normally it's because there's the nest already built around them. But obviously, you're not drafting early in the draft if you have a great team. I mean, it's just a byproduct of math, right? So if you're sitting there in Washington, you have to have just hope that if you do go quarterback, that they're going to give him the full 4 years, good, bad, or ugly. Because a lot of these guys, and Josh Allen is a prime example of this, would have been quit on at the end of that second year. Oh, it's a bust. We didn't make it work. What did Buffalo do? They went and got Diggs instead. They just leaned into it hard. So you look at the what they have there. They have a lot of old retreads on offense. And if I'm looking at Washington, assuming you don't take and get all of Vegas's picks forever, because I will never say that's a bad idea to any team. I will not, because Vegas is a team in complete disarray. But if you look at them, Eckler's not moving the needle. Zach Ertz isn't moving the needle.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Scary Terry. So I would basically make the argument of one of two things: either trade the pick or Marvin Harrison Jr. And again, I cannot understate how much I feel it doesn't matter where Marvin
or Malik Neighbors
goes.
Or somebody like that.
Just like J. Jeff, and do that. That's how much I feel Harrison will take this league over. It doesn't matter who's throwing him the ball. You do have a possibility, like happened down in Tampa this year, which is Mariota, this is your last chance ever. Are you going to become something? And basically, you're our fill-in until we make the next. So we'll give two good receiving options in Scary Terry and Harrison. Or, again, trading back and taking the third receiver in the draft isn't a bad idea either. And basically just saying, hey, we're going to put some points up now. Because when you look at the coaching staff they acquired, they're all guys who are on their second go-arounds. Dan Quinn, Kingsbury, and Witt are not in need of having to win now. They wouldn't have taken the gig if they are. They're, in general, disciplined people. So, on a complete aside, I don't think I ever want Cliff Kingsbury developing a quarterback for me. But giving him a receiver to play with isn't a bad idea either, especially someone who's electric. So, in that regards, if I were Washington, I would not be upset if they trade the pick. I also would not be upset if they take Harrison. I also would love it because it would implode the whole draft for so many people's draft boards. But you look at the defense, there's a glaring need at edge. There's some other glaring needs. You know, they're don't
So
really have.
can I just bring this point up just to add to what
But the answer to the sort of question, if you're building a nest, I would go all in on one side of the ball and not play half and half.
Okay. So I just want to discuss this because I think it's an important point, is that the Washington Commanders, they have had over the last, let me go back. I'm going to go back to the last time they drafted a quarterback. They drafted a quarterback in 2019 in Dwayne Haskins, who is no longer with us. So that was the last time they drafted a quarterback. This has been their quarterbacks since 2019. These are the quarterbacks that have started games for the Commanders. Keenum, Haskins, McCoy, Smith, Haskins, Allen, Heineke, Fitzpatrick, Garrett Gilbert, Heineke, Wentz, Sam Howell. So they have had over those last several. They had in 2020.
I just want to throw this question out there as someone who's followed some Georgia football in their life. Fundamentally speaking, is there that big of a difference between Sam Howell and Jake Fromm?
Maybe not.
That's my point. So with that being said,
maybe not.
If I were them, they've already bought two new offensive linemen.
That's what I'm trying to get to. Is that if
I would argue trade the pick, get the receiver, unless these guys go get Williams. Because again, Mike Williams is the last hurrah, and then get the quarterback. That part makes sense to me too. And then you have Mariota to mentor.
Because that's kind of the picture here. That's
probably the more probable route, actually.
Cliff Kingsbury wants a dual threat quarterback. So I mean, that is known. But when you have a dual threat quarterback in the vein of Justin Fields, in the vein of Kyler Murray, if you don't have talent around him, you are going to make his life hell for a significant period of time. And so is it the right time for Washington to take a quarterback? I didn't think they would trade Sam Howell, to be honest with you, because yes, Sam Howell wasn't fantastic, but he wasn't the worst quarterback in the league last year.
True.
That went to Kenny Pickett. So you and maybe
Russell Wilson.
So you've got to look at it and say, okay, yeah, it's sexy to take that wide receiver, or it's sexy to take that quarterback in that top couple of picks, but the Commanders need a lot, and they're far away. I mean, they went from not being far away over the last several years to being really far away. And you're looking at the last times that they've drafted. So from 2021, so in 2020, they drafted second overall. From 2021 to 2023, they were 16 and 19. And, you look back, the highest pick outside of Chase Young that they had, number 5, they had 2015. 24 and 2013, they didn't have a pick, and then back to 2002 where they had the second overall pick. So this is an organization that they've not been good, but there has been years where they've been a little bit closer than they were the year before, and then they fall back. So all I'm saying is that I don't think it's I even though that Washington needs a quarterback, I really don't think that they should take a quarterback in this scenario, which then gets us to this next conversation and thinking about teams that are pretty set at quarterback, right? There's a lot of teams in the league that.
Well, this is the interesting part of this draft. You look at picks 4 through 10, assuming Chicago takes one with their first pick. They aren't taking a quarterback. Even the Jets aren't taking a quarterback. So you look at that and say that's where the opportunity for Arizona to trade with exists. And if I'm Washington, listen, I guess this is my answer. If I'm Washington and I'm set on the quarterback, and not to give the most unsatisfying answer ever, you have to take them because you're second overall. But
yeah,
if you just feel that there's not really a big difference between this guy and Penix, which there isn't,
I would disagree. I think
I would take 13th. I fully stand by that Penix will be the most productive quarterback.
Well, I mean, if he doesn't need bionic legs by the end of the year because he's busted both of his Achilles.
So was Rivers when he came out.
But anyway, you're right. But I will say this. You're looking at. Let me just verify this for a moment. There is a team out there that.
But if you're Denver or the Raiders, you 100% have to get in front of Minnesota.
Yeah, if you're Denver or the Raiders, you absolutely have to be in front of Minnesota. And the opportunity to get in front of Minnesota.
I'll lose the Saints too, quite frankly.
I was just about to say the New Orleans Saints, but we'll get to them in a minute. When you look at like the way that this is made up, yes, we know everybody has identified that Chicago, Washington, and New England all need quarterbacks, but they also need other things. And so Washington feels like that opportunity for a team to trade up and get above. This is especially true if New England is alluding that they're going to take a quarterback, and say Denver gets word of that, or say Las Vegas gets word of that, and they want to take a quarterback, they're going to have to trade with Washington. And I think it would be silly, and this is just speculative, but I think it'd be silly for Washington to not be open to that because their team needs so much. And a team
I completely agree.
And a team like Vegas, who needs a lot too, but they're also with some aging stars. They got rid of Jacobs, so they're in this position now where they're completely rebuilding, and it probably wouldn't behoove Las Vegas to go out and get a quarterback because they also need
true, but it's the right way. It doesn't ever behoove their long term.
They need a lot, and Denver. We don't know what Denver's doing. I mean, we can say we know what Denver's doing. We were talking 2 years ago that Denver was one of our favorite teams in the league coming out of the offseason in the prior year. There's no way that Russell Wilson is going to be bad again. There's no way that this Hall of Fame coach is going to be not good with them. And they were just bad again. Like, this organization has issues. But I don't want to talk about Denver today because Denver's just going to make me mad. But I do want to talk about the Saints because,
All right.
Joe, I don't know what this team is doing. You go out, you sign Chase Young.
First off, they had the softest division or the softest schedule by over-unders of all time, and they
we
missed
said that
it.
last year too. We said that last
No,
year.
that's what they had. I'm just talking about last year. They had that, and they failed.
So they go out and they sign Chase Young to a guaranteed contract, and today they find out that Chase Young needs to have neck surgery. Okay? You're sitting here. They also signed Nate Peterman. It's never good to sign Nate Peterman. Let's just say that right there. The guy's threw for like 6 interceptions in a game. Why would you want him on your team? That makes zero sense. Carr is a guy that we both like, but he has issues. But those issues were intensified by the way that these games were played last year. They went out, they got rid of Michael Thomas, which I think was writing on the wall for the last several years now, which I don't blame them for doing. You're sitting here with a talent in Chris Olave. You're sitting with talent in Rashid Shaheed. You went out and you got Cedric Wilson, who's another barn burner, who's going to try to get that ball moving for Carr. Jamal Williams last year was a disappointment. Never really saw the field much. The offensive line is an offensive line, I guess. And you sit here with this defense, and this defense, we said last year, aging defense, you're trying to get younger, and it's a team that should be better than what the product is being put out onto the field. And I just worry that in the next several years that this Saints organization is making moves that are very suspect and very confusing. And they're throwing a lot of money at players that I don't really think they should be throwing money at. I mean, outside of Derek Carr, if Derek Carr gets hurt, you don't have another quarterback on the roster that's worth playing.
Well, most teams don't, which we went through
this Taysom Hill experience a couple of times, and while it might be exciting for a little while, it's very unnerving to have your second quarterback also be listed as your second tight end. And that's a thing that New Orleans has had for a little while now. But talk to us a little bit about this team, because this is a team that every single year we say, oh, they're not far away. Oh, they're not far away. They're a team that should be winning more. And it's just not in the cards for the New Orleans Saints. So
they're clear-cut number 3 in that division.
Tell us what's going on.
And I don't really think that they can do anything this offseason to actually change that. Like, their offensive line is all right. I mean, let's laugh at it. The Saints have a decent
offensive line. Yeah.
But if Olave isn't 100%, I don't really look at the rest of their skill positions and be like, yeah, this is going to do it for me. An aging Alvin Kamara and an aging Jamal Williams that literally just took all of the rushes and the carries from Kadendre Miller last year, who was their 3rd-round pick, wasn't really great for development. So now you're essentially going to be forced into using him, which, again, running back in his 2nd year, you should run the wheels off of. This team doesn't have a striking fear point in you. Their defense, they actually have done a pretty good job of starting to turn over the secondary. With the exception of Lattimore, they're all drafted in 21 or younger. So the secondary, they have slowly kind of turned around on us. So if I were them, I'm looking at this and saying, you need to get another person who can stretch this field. Shaheed is a great story. He's not consistent. Or maybe said another way. You either need to make up your mind if Olave is an intermediate and deep field receiver, and then you need to go get the opposite. So, and I would not bring Mike Williams here. He's one of the teams I actually don't think would be a good idea, mostly because they can't afford him.
Right.
This team is also in cap hell. Yeah, so they have been trying to restructure forever.
That's what I wanted to bring up. Is that this?
That's what happens when you kick the can forever, basically, Bob. You're stuck with what you're holding.
We've been talking about this for years and years to come. And we'll continue to talk about it. I remember our guest on the show, 2 years ago, that we were talking about this same problem. That is, what is actually going to happen? Hold on, Mike Williams is signing a 1-year deal with the Jets, $15 million with the Jets.
Makes a ton of sense.
Just talking about it, and it happened. So that makes a lot of sense. So you
Bills are going to be taking receiving their first pick, no doubt. As
you can take the Jets off of that wide receiver need list at this moment.
That's for the Jets. That's a very smart thing to do. Not to derail this with breaking news,
but yeah. Back to kicking the can. That the Saints have been in cap hell for the last. Feels like 7 years.
At least.
The one position or the one situation on the field that they really have issues with, like we said, they have an offensive line, but the offensive line is often injured. The offensive line often isn't good, and they lost guys in free agency that maybe they weren't great, but they still played, and it was still like okay-ish. The biggest problem with this team is the lines. Now, outside of Cameron Jordan and outside of Granderson, the whole interior of the Saints, from the defensive side of the ball and the offensive
their first round pick last year was a nose tackle.
Right. Breesy. Yeah. So you look at both of these, positions on the field, and you could say that this team could be stronger if they were better in the trenches. And see,
I'm going to argue that's part of Kamara's fault.
Because their offensive
line, Kamara can't do power. Kamara cannot be effective on this team. Kamara's not an effective running back anymore. I would not be surprised if he actually gets cut before week 1. Possibly same with Jamal Williams as well. If I were New England, I would strongly consider another day 2 running back and reset that position. I'm not opposed to D-line in for the first round pick for that. But or receiver. When I look at this team, you don't need to do the running back part right now. You can push that down the road, see what you got in Kendra Miller. Okay, I'm cool with that. But a receiver has to go in the first 3 rounds. An edge rusher has to go in the first 3 rounds.
I think they need offensive line help.
Well, we look at their offensive line as it stands right now.
So, Joe, they can't.
4 of them are first or second round draft picks. So, granted,
the problem is they can't afford to make a free agent move. That's the problem with the Saints.
No, they can't. They got what they got, and you have 4 needs and 3 premium draft picks. Exactly. One of them is not getting addressed. I'm saying I would push running back is the one I want to address. I would go get the receiver second, the edge rusher first, and then the line depth in the 3rd round. That's how I would do it if I was New Orleans. But that being said, this offense, especially if Atlanta takes a receiver in that 7th pick overall, this offense can't fight with Atlanta's anymore. This offense can't fight even with Tampa's. I don't see a scenario where these guys don't finish 3rd in their division.
Which is a long cry from what we were saying last year. So
last year we thought they were going to get the bye because of how easy their schedule was.
Speaking of the rest of this division, let's talk a little bit about Atlanta.
Sure.
When we look at Atlanta went out and it's so funny. I love it when teams go out and get players like a year after missing out on a big player that they could have had for the same amount of money. Just bringing up this idea of Tennessee, just before we get to Atlanta, is that, Tennessee sitting there going, oh yeah, we don't want to give AJ Brown the money. Meanwhile, they were in a cap problem as well.
Yeah, but it was a little different.
We're not going to sign, him for $100 million, but we're going to sign Calvin Ridley, who sucked last year, for $92 million. Again, I love stuff when that happens like that, but Atlanta goes out, gets their quarterback this year, goes out, grabs Cousins, trades Ritter to Arizona, so that now there's not even a question about who the quarterback situation is in there. They could have went out and potentially got Lamar Jackson last year, all this stuff, had Justin Fields, but they settled on Kirk Cousins, which I think for Atlanta's offense is safe. I think that this idea of a pocket passer who can stretch the ball downfield fits really well when we think about what Kyle Pitts should be doing, and it fits really well with what we know Drake London can do. And so Atlanta feels like it's in a position now where they could be the leader in the clubhouse outside of Tampa. We haven't talked about Tampa yet, but
I would make an argument that
hold on, let me finish.
First, Atlanta is a team that accepted what they were. 2 years ago, they didn't do anything on defense. They, in fact, last offseason, they did any significant play on their defense has been. They have one first rounder that they drafted on their defense, and that was in 2020. That was the AJ. That was the AJ Terrell when everyone said they should have taken CeeDee Lamb instead. That was that draft. Since then, it's been all offense, which again, not necessarily a problem. If I'm them, I'm looking receiver or left tackle, and just knowing that we can run the ball like crazy. I wouldn't mind picking up a true blocking tight end a little bit down there. Now, you can make an argument that they just signed Charlie Warmer. That could be an argument. Okay. But I would really want to say, you know what? Give another dynamic receiver, try to build Minnesota South, and just see what can happen. So, because I'd argue these talent players, no one's as good as JJ. No one's fighting that. But between Bijan and Drake, that might be ahead of Addison and Hawkinson as far as 2 and 3.
And to build off that too, Joe, is that what pick do they have? They have the 8th pick, I believe. And so
my line is 8, yeah.
If you're sitting there at 8, and let's say a guy like Malik Neighbors is there, or Romy, or Odunze is there, it would make, even though Atlanta needs more tenacity on the defense, they need to get after teams on defense. So an edge rusher makes sense at the 8th position for Atlanta. But offensively, if a guy is sitting there like Odunze, do they go out and try to get another big body target to catch the ball? Or
that's what I would argue, because that's one thing Drake isn't.
Right. Or are you thinking that maybe they go later in the draft, scoop up a couple wide receivers that are really good at blocking, but can also catch a little bit, and then make that identity about Bijan Robinson? What do you feel if they go edge rusher and they do that? Is that it's an option for them, and feels like it's a realistic option that they could win games like that? Because
it's a very good option, but it's not what Atlanta would do.
Last year was a quarterback because Ritter just couldn't do it.
Yeah, no, it's a very good option. It's something the Rams would do. It's very smart, but it's not what Atlanta will do.
True. I could see that. I mean, okay, speaking of the Rams, we just had Aaron Donald retire. A legend from Pitt, a legend in the NFL, good man. And
not fighting any of that. Legend from Pitt doesn't need to be applied, though.
And now the Rams are sitting here, and we are everybody in the whole entire universe who watches football is quite surprised by what the Rams put together with last year. I mean, most people had the Rams.
The Rams are who Atlanta wants to be. Veteran quarterback who's shown they can do it. We have receivers that we can make good, and the quarterback can take you the rest of the way. So if I'm the Rams here, and this is going to be weird because I'm pretty sure they have a first-round pick this year, Bob.
Hey, maybe.
They do, at number 19 overall.
Woo! What? First time in a long time, baby.
Yeah, so hi-de-ho on that. Obviously, they don't need a receiver. I mean, this is one of the teams that they don't need a receiver. But you look at it, their offensive line held up really well. They caught lightning in the bottle with Williams. So you can make an argument they don't even need to look at offense. And if you can build, especially the way
I
that
still think you need a wide receiver if you're the Rams, at least one.
Oh, I don't know. You got Coop and Puka, man.
Yeah, but Cup, the injuries are a concern. So I would definitely.
I'm not using that in the day 1 or day 2 pick.
No. I'm not saying they go after.
I mean, you always should draft a receiver on day 3. Every team should do that, if for no other reasons for special teams. Yes, that part is still a given. But I'm talking about in terms of talent. So when I look at this and say, also, have they given up all the way on Tutu Atwell, their second round pick from 21?
Okay, so I want
to. He's on a contract year.
Can I say something that's gonna maybe make you think a little bit, maybe make you a little bit mad, maybe make you say, maybe this is gonna be a good one, maybe. Brock Bowers. The Rams, one of the offensive, I know you're a big Higbee guy, but one of the offensive needs of the Rams, outside of finding a kicker who can actually kick the ball consistently enough for this team, is the tight end. I mean,
you're right on that.
I don't think they've given up on Tutu Atwell at all. I think he's a good enough option, and I think that he's a good fill-in option. But Tyler Higbee offers literally nothing.
Well, let's back this up. I love Higbee in the fantasy world because he would get all the targets before 2 years ago, before Puka was on that roster, and Stafford just threw everything short. I am at the point where the time has passed on Mr. Higbee. But that being said, and I guess this is a broader point that I want to bring up because it needs to be said, and a lot of people are going to get this wrong. Sam Laporta is an anomaly. Period.
He's good.
Rookie tight ends do not produce. They should not. It does not happen. Even Kincaid did not do a ton of production in a pass-happy offense. So I say this to say that the Rams actually do want to do something with their tight end position. You're probably at this point going to have to do so via trade. And you look at people who would be an obvious upgrade. There's many of them. But one spot that has their own cap situations and would be willing to move them is Cleveland. Njoku is someone that would work in here. Cleveland has cap problems. And you go, okay, this can make sense. We can work something out here. And I don't think it's going to happen. I don't want to try to bet anything on it.
Right.
But I think that when you look at the Rams offense overall, and I'm sitting there in their front office, I would be willing to let it ride, maybe use a second or a third pick to fix the future problem. But right now, I need to replace the pass rush that just retired from Aaron Donald.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That needs to be my first and second round pick.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I really think that it would be the way that they have to go. Is they would have to go out and get a guy that could.
They only have 4 defensive linemen on their roster right now.
I think that, speaking of what we said last year about the Rams, and it was one of the only reasons outside of Cooper Kupp's injury that really turned us off to the Rams was the defense in general, is that there were a lot of names that weren't names to, anybody outside the Rams organization at that point in time. And to go to the point that I want to say about the tight ends, they did pick up Colby Parkinson from Seattle, signed him to a decent contract, but I mean, that doesn't, it's okay. It is what it is. But to your point, edge rusher, interior rush is very important because you look at the teams that are in this division that they're going to have to contest with, and you're going to want to win the battles in the trenches. You're going to want to pass rush. You're going to want to have that happen. Every team does. But the Rams are in a position now where their needs aren't many. And that's weird.
Especially.
It's weird to say out of a team that is crazy. I mean, they're eventually going to have to find a replacement for Stafford, but that's not this year.
Not this year.
And they're going to have to go out and make sure they get, continue to get offensive line support and depth like every other.
Always need to do that.
So speaking of teams that are, ascending, but, potentially disappointing, the Buffalo Bills. Let's talk a little bit about the Buffalo Bills.
Buffalo Bills need a number one wide receiver. Period. They don't know this. They don't admit it yet. Until Buffalo gets a number one receiver again, they're done.
So Buffalo has been quite disappointing over the last several years for many of the Buffalo fan. Seems like they're wasting the best years of Josh Allen and not getting them enough to get over the hump. So for all intents and purposes, Joe, you say that a wide receiver will get them over the hump. Is there any position? Is there any other position, defensively or offensively, that you feel is a need for the Buffalo Bills heading into this draft that they have not addressed in free agency?
So if I'm Buffalo, everything matters about the postseason, and particularly about having home field advantage. And this is integral to this plan here. They didn't score enough points last year. Diggs wasn't able to carry them. Granted, if Diggs had any other legitimate, competent receiver out there, top 15 type. When I say competent, I mean top 15, so super quality. It wouldn't have been that way. They don't need to have an elite defense because they have a blizzard in their stadium. So you saw what Kansas City, who again did not have an elite defense, made Miami irrelevant. Buffalo has that same advantage. So I first and foremost want points for and home field advantage. And the way that you're getting there is through the passing game and relying on Allen. Yes, you always have the risk of Allen running too much. Cook showed a little something. Personally, the running back position in Buffalo, I think, is the biggest tease in fantasy football. So I don't really necessarily think that we need to go that way. I do like Kincaid's game. I liked how he developed. In the second and third year of tight ends, you start to see something. Granted, they normally peak out in their fourth year, but you can start seeing something. He's ahead of his curve for his development curve. Kincaid is. He's still not going to be a number two receiver like Laporta was on a quality passing team. They got Curtis Samuel, decent slot, whatever. He's not really moving the needle. They need to go get a real one. I appreciate that they said Gabe Davis isn't the answer and they're ready to move on from it. But Diggs was great. He was phenomenal. He carried them. He's incapable of doing that. Diggs as a number two receiver, scary. So if I'm Buffalo, that's my entire mindset. Go out, get more points, do it through the offense, and they're bringing back the same line. Nothing wrong with that. So I look at that. That's where I would focus. This would be an offseason of offense. Yeah, and that's how I would approach it. They did lose one of their safeties in Poirier, or Poyer rather. Sorry, I said that wrong. Not to bring up my whole UFC background, but
UFC background. You watch UFC. You don't have
love
the
UFC
background. You watch UFC.
I guess that's a more specific way of saying that. But you also make the argument that they have been a complete pass rush of tier 2 guys, and with Von Miller at the end. Could he be a cap casualty when we come up towards training camp to get under a buzzer? I personally wonder that out loud.
I'm glad you brought that up because the Bills are in kind of a salary cap hell, just like the Saints are. They've got a lot of money invested in players that may or may not be performing at their optimal ability here. But one of the things that that is important about this year's draft is there seems to be a lot of good wide receivers out there for various reasons. And, you got to think about team needs and talent and, who do you think you can coach up and who fits your scheme and whatnot. Although I think that fitting my scheme thing is a little bit bullshit because if you're good, I can make you better is the way that a coach should think, not you're good, but you don't fit into my system. I don't.
Well, there is some legitimate elements. Like for instance, if you need a downfield receiver, you can't get a guy who can't do it.
That's different. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that
I think Buffalo needs a downfield receiver.
Yeah. Well, the Shakir isn't that guy. He could be, but he isn't. But Gabe Davis really wasn't either.
He wasn't. Gabe Davis got hurt and lost his speed.
So
I mean, that's the fundamental problem with Gabe.
But they also need defensive line depth, and they need defensive line men. So my question to you, Joe, is with that first round pick, knowing that there are a lot of quality wide receivers in the draft, and defensive linemen and defensive ends in particular tend to be very difficult to find, do you feel that the Buffalo Bills will wait out the wide receivers and get them in like the second, third, maybe fourth round, and go edge and defensive line a little bit earlier?
No, because I want to get one who could be potentially a top 15 in this league. And you'd get those in the first round. Even if he's the fourth one off the board. If you can give me another elite one that, one day we start talking the same lights like CeeDee Lamb at his peak, like we did with Diggs, you do that. Because so then you have this problem solved now for 5 years.
So the Bills would be sitting at pick 28.
You're looking about the fifth receiver off the board.
If they don't trade out, and I'm just looking up a random mock draft here, and what it's looking like is that Brian Thomas will be picked in the first round before they pick. It's looking like people are projecting that Odunze will be taken. They're projecting that obviously Marvin Harrison will be taken, and that Malik Neighbors will be taken. So the next wide receiver that some people like is Adonai Mitchell from Texas, who is a speedster, didn't play a ton, it says here. He's a raw route runner, but he has blazing speed. So you look at that and that says, that kind of fills a need that Buffalo needs. They need a guy with blazing speed that can get down the field, that you're not worried about a big route tree for this guy. He's on the field to extend the play and make it deeper. So sitting there at pick 28, there's a very good chance that they go with Donnie Mitchell, and would make sense.
It does. I mean, because like I said, you need to put points on the board. And also, everyone knows the less people are in the box, the easier it is to run it.
Yeah.
So it's another factor.
Speaking about the box, but let's turn that box over to the defensive side of the ball here. Indianapolis is a team that they've got guys.
Indianapolis is all in.
They've got guys.
I don't think there's a chance of a middle ground on Indianapolis.
What do you see? Like, what are their moves in this offseason telling you that is going to project you forward to this NFL draft here?
Let me start this.
How important is the return of your boy Anthony Richardson?
If Indianapolis is in the playoffs, Joe Flacco will be playing. So here's the fundamental problem that Indy has. Pittman is a really good possession big guy receiver. Richardson isn't accurate enough on those low passes. He needs the ball to be downfield and have people run under it like Lamar Jackson needs. And yes, Josh Downs can do that, and Pierce can as well. But this is why Pittman needs to be downgraded across the board. And they just gave him a ton of money because it's not a good schematical fit. Anthony Richardson, to have a good running game, you need to be able to collect on the easy give-me's that you get from linebackers cheating down on your running back. That's the intermediate and short passing game. He doesn't have it. So I could be completely wrong, but this is the gamble that Indianapolis is making. Will Anthony Richards' accuracy improve at the NFL level to be able to do it? Sure, he can run. He can do all that stuff. Is it going to actually matter? No, because there's no one aside from maybe Downs that can push this ball downfield. It is a poor receiver to quarterback matchup. It just is. Maybe Cooter can fix it, who's their offensive coordinator. But when you look at their defense, they just let Shaq Leonard go.
No, that's not that big of a loss because he hasn't really performed. He's been hurt.
He's been hurt. I do like Zaire as their middle.
Zaire Franklin looked good last year. That's true.
Yeah. So when you look at the team, I mean, it's going to be a run-of-the-mill defense. It's not going to be something that's going to blow your mind up. It's not going to be something you need to blow up. But it's An offense that entirely comes down to them making a decision.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to be a running team, or are we going to try to let Richardson throw the ball through it? Because what you saw last year, and the biggest comparable is the Ravens. Because when you saw the Ravens run the ball through the entire regular season, things were great. Won the bye, all awesome. When they tried to become a passing game, for who the hell knows why, in the playoffs, couldn't move the ball to save their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the problem that Indianapolis is going to have. Will they be disciplined and be willing to run the ball after you signed Pittman that check, who again, big physical receiver, great at blocking. Are you going to be able to sell that to your team, saying we're truly running the ball team, and we're going to have to rein Richardson in until he proves he's not? Because you can't get the easy 5-yard pass anymore. Now JTT has to go get it for you.
Right.
And some coordinators let that happen, and some coordinators throw the ball 500 times a punt.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, that's the gamble of Indianapolis. I don't think they are more talented than either the Texans or the Jaguars.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's going to be, they are going to be the Chicago of the AFC. So they're going to be on every single still in the hunt list, but never in the wild card contention.
Bringing this to a head here, then, we know that Indianapolis needs secondary help, and we know that there's a lot of potential cornerbacks that are in the draft right now. Wiggins being one of them that is being said that maybe he'll go to the Steelers and things like that. But like I just brought up with the Rams, Brock Bowers is still around. And Brock Bowers is a guy that can block, but his main talent is in yak. He has ball skills and things like that. So you're telling me that intermediate routes are an issue for the Colts.
They're not an issue because of the catchers. They're an issue because of the passer.
What I bring up is this point is that you get a tight end that can block and catch, which is fairly rare enough in the draft. Even though it's not a definite position of need, could you see the Colts, if he's still there when their pick comes around, saying, I kind of see Brock Bowers as a future talent on our team. Not, he's not Rob Gronkowski, but he could be a guy for us. Is that a possibility with anchoring a team with a blocking and catching tight end, a quarterback that can run the ball, and you have a young guy in Josh Downs that is fairly good? Is it more important for the Colts right now to get one more cornerback to add to their depth, or is it important for them to go after so they don't have to keep starting and trying to get the ball in the end zone to Mo Alley Cox?
All right, so specific to your tight end question, as I said, most tight ends start coming out of their shell and being really productive in their third and fourth years. They got Jelani Woods, who's now entering his third year, third-round pick. No one knows who he was. And they got Granderson as well, or Granson. I can't read his name right now, who was a fourth-round pick of 2021. So third-year guy and a fourth-year guy. I would not be surprised if either one of them develop into one of the run-of-the-mill between number 10 and number 16 tight ends in fantasy. So I wouldn't say that that's a need.
I didn't say it was a need either.
I would continue riding the all-in on the Richardson experiment by saying, we built you this nest. We now gave you a legitimate competition if you falter, although it won't be a competition. We're going to go build the defense for you now. So just like the Green Bay did with Rodgers, here's your people, man. We just paid. We built the nest by keeping Pittman around. We cut the check to keep him. Now we're going to go build a defense to make life easier on you. That being said, I don't think it's going to be able enough to hold Houston in check at all. So you could, quite frankly, I think you put Lawrence Taylor on this team and they couldn't slow down Houston. I don't think they can keep up with them. So when I look at this and say, Colts, rebuild your defense. I love DeForest Buckner. I love Grover, or Grover Stewart rather, but they're old. And we're at a spot where we need to start rebuilding because this team is very quickly in danger of having that front seven look a lot like the Saints. They're all drafted, with the exception of Whitty Page from last year. They're pretty much all drafted prior to 2020. No, granted, their secondary is younger, but you have you don't have premium picks in that either. So I'm the Colts. I'm going all defense. I'm going to just let the entire system ride, with hoping that going back to what I said before, let the head coach work on the system he's there for, and put your resources into the other one. He is an offensive coordinator, head coach. Don't put more resources into it from an Indianapolis perspective.
So as we think about resources, we've got to look at some teams that we haven't looked at yet, whose resource management has been suspect over the last several years, but seems to be turning around in the Cleveland Browns. And the Green Bay Packers. These are two teams where they've invested a lot in certain positions on their team. For both Cleveland and Green Bay, it turned out fairly well for them this year.
Without Watson, by the way, the year they had to go all in, and he got hurt for
making the playoffs and seeing that for the first time in a long time, with Cleveland, and then Green Bay showing up. Like when they looked dead to rights at certain points in time in the season, they ended up showing up. So Green Bay, in my opinion, Green Bay's in a better situation than Cleveland is. I didn't like that they got rid of Aaron Jones, but Josh Jacobs is good. So, I mean, there is that, but he doesn't offer you the same things in my mind that Aaron Jones offered you. But regardless, these are two teams that have invested a lot in certain positions on the field. So in free agency, what do you like about what they did and did not do to make their team better?
Well, Cleveland's up against it due to the Watson contract. There's just no way around that. Cleveland's biggest risk, and I don't even know to the degree that they understand this, is the health of Nick Chubb. If they cannot run the ball, this ain't going to work. And yeah, sure, Ford gave you some flashes in games, but there is no one, maybe Bijan, maybe Taylor, that can replace Chubb.
Well, Chris McCaffrey can't be replaced. So,
all right, McCaffrey's a different kind of runner, though. I'm talking about running the ball between the tackles.
Oh, you mean like a pure runner?
Yes, and just dominate the game on the ground. And Henry could, but I think he's aged out. So when you look at this and say, if he can't do that, this receiving core is not fast, to say it generously. Judy isn't, Amari isn't, and Njoku obviously isn't as a tight end. So if you don't have the play action sucking in the safeties, it is much harder for those to do windows. They also had to lose a lot of offensive line help due to cap restrictions. So if I'm Cleveland, I'm drafting O-line immediately because Watson gets hurt, the whole thing breaks because Jameis ain't going to fix this.
But I mean, again,
I'm looking offensive line, and even though no one would want to do it, I'm looking running back in the second round if I'm Cleveland. And
that's fair.
You need it. And the defense be what it be. I mean, you're already playing in a division with Burrow and the MVP. You're probably not slowing them down with your diminished roster. So rather than throwing half at a process, make one side of your ball elite and just hope you can win that style of game. And maybe you're lucky and Denzel Ward will pick you off, give you an interception here and there. But that's how I would do with Cleveland. I would go all in on the offense. Schwartz isn't a bad defensive coordinator. Not exactly a good head coach in Detroit, but not a bad offensive or defensive coordinator. And that's how I would approach it. All of my remaining resources are going into the offensive line to try to keep Watson upright. And maybe if I can get a a receiver in the 3rd round, the 4th round. You mentioned all these depth guys that we solid do that. But I would seriously argue taking one of the first running backs off the board if I was Cleveland.
And we can talk about that more as the draft gets closer and closer. And we're looking here at Cleveland's wide receiver room here. The top 3 wide receivers: Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, and Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy and Amari Cooper they both had good games in the past.
They've had flashes. I'm not saying that.
Had flashes of good games. Will this be the spot that turns it around? Who's to know that? But I tend to agree with you here, Joe, is that, Cleveland went out and got two backup quarterbacks that are good. Tyler Huntley is a good backup quarterback. Jameis Winston is a good backup quarterback. Mm-hmm. If they need to come in to win you a game, I believe that they can come in and win you a game. But this all comes down to to what happens with Chubb, because this team could go light years beyond what we think these players' capabilities are if they have a run game, because Amari Cooper's talent is strengthened by a run game. Jerry Jeudy, when he can get open, is strengthened by the run game as well. And Elijah Moore, we know, has the chance to do that as well. So just speaking of the running backs, I think you're absolutely right, because even though we like Jerome Ford from a fantasy perspective, he can't handle a whole workload. And so if Chubb isn't 100%, or even if Chubb isn't 85%, this is going to be an issue for Cleveland, and it's something that they should address. And we can talk a little bit in the future about.
It's also not the Cleveland Browns line of old. I mean, no, that's the part that needs to get pointed out here.
And we can talk a little bit in the future about how the draft could shake out with running backs, because running backs, in terms of the NFL draft itself, have really fallen down the boards. They're not as coveted anymore with the way that the NFL.
Well, the elite ones are. Bijan and Gibbs showed up and balled out.
No. I'm saying in terms of the scope of the NFL draft itself, it's not talked about much. So let's talk a little bit about Green Bay, though, because Green Bay is in a position, like we said, they got Josh Jacobs. They're sticking pat at they're sticking pat with their wide receiver room.
They have to. They're all young.
I'm really thinking, Joe, and this is something I'm really thinking, that they got a chance to push for the Super Bowl this year. With
it's not out of the realm.
With what they showed last year and the tenacity that they showed. Granted, do I think they're as good as Kansas City? I do not think they're as good as Kansas City. Do I think they're as good as Philly? Maybe.
I'm not ready to put them as kings of the NFC, but I can definitely see it wouldn't be crazy to be having them compete right there for a wild card in a division. I mean, they're definitely a playoff team. Let's just start with that. Mm-hmm. This roster, you look at it offensively, it's their lowest. First off, they're all internally drafted. So the continuity standpoint is through the roof, and that is a testament to LaFleur. But when you look at where they're at, they haven't had a real pass rusher forever.
We know that. Yeah, we know that.
And their secondary leaves some to be desired. But they have put themselves in a spot now where if just from a schematical point, 2 power running backs, one of which who led the league in rushing 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. Incredibly fast and dynamic receivers that can do a lot, actually run a complete route tree instead of just a go route. And a tight end that, could actually be something here. They have the capability of running 2 tight end sets. They have the capability of running 4 receiver sets. Mm-hmm. And with Josh Jacobs or A.J. Dillon in the backfield, there's always the capability of running the ball between the tackles. Mm-hmm. So when you have to defend this team from a roster construction standpoint, I would argue they're one of the hardest to prepare for because they are able to do so much things well. I'm not saying they are the best at any of them, but they will be able to be in the top 10 in all of them. So and when you look at that, you can really exploit some defenses that way. And I think that schematically speaking, I still think they should have beat them this year, but I think they could have beat the Niners.
So we look at the Green Bay Packers still, and we look at the amount of picks as we lead up to the draft. We'll talk a little bit more in depth, as for the draft going forward. But the Packers are sitting here with a treasure trove of picks. They've got pick 25, 41, 58, 88, 91, and 125. You would have to think
5 in the top 100.
You would have to think with a team that was that close. And after that, they have 168, 201, 219, 245, and 255. So
I bet 4 of those top 5 picks go on defense.
So you look at this and you say, all right, if I'm the Packers and I haven't had a pass rusher in a long time, do I go quantity or do I go quality? Do I step up and try to make a move for whatever they think is the top guy and move up a little bit with that 58th or that 88th pick and throw that in there to move up? Because this is with where they're at right now as a team, they are so solid. And this is not everybody. I'm not a Green Bay Packers fan. Joe will attest to that. But with this team, the way it's set up right now, they are. This is the type of draft with the type of team that they have out right now. This is the type of draft that will make this team the team of the future.
So that is true.
Are there enough players that would fill the needs of the Green Bay Packers that will be available? And we'll talk about this at another time. I just want to put that earworm in your brain because
and this is how I would answer it.
It's just there.
We saw 2 playoff teams be able to address this, and they used the same system, Philadelphia and Buffalo. Having a wave after wave after wave of B-plus pass rushers can work. And if I were them, that's what I would do because I don't want to put all of my eggs in the Devontae Watt becomes an elite pass rusher like the Nick Bosa. Don't think it's going to happen. But what I'd rather do is use 2 of those top 100 picks on edge rushers because now it's a wearing you down, especially if you can get different style edge rushers between power ones and speed ones to be able to put pressure on opposing tackles, play in and play out. So that would be the direction I would go. I mean, obviously, as we said before, you can never have too many corners, but that's the area I'm looking at because offensively speaking, ride it. Don't mess with it. Don't try adding to it. Build the defense, and it seems like every year they do their first round pick on defense, unless they do quarterback or defense. It's the Green Bay way. So they're not going quarterback. So let's go defense, and that's what I would like to see. If you give me 4 of the 5 of them, yeah, and just go at it. I would absolutely love to see that. I also love that they got a fullback on their roster. One of the few teams still kicking it old school like that.
Yeah.
So, like I said, you're totally right, Bob. Because if you get a solid pass rush, especially if it's the no-name Buffalo style, well, then now all of a sudden, how do you slow them down? Because Green Bay is going to have so much pressure offensively on you to have to throw the ball because if these guys get the reputation like Houston has, like they can drop 30 on you at any time, well, now I got to be in that mode in the first half. And now my pass rush is the key to this game.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm just looking at a couple of beat writer websites, one of them right now, Lombardi Avenue, and they're suggesting that maybe they go linebacker because of losing Devondre Campbell in free agency, and that's a really good suggestion because you look at what the Detroit Lions did last year, and the Detroit Lions bucked what everybody thought was going to be what they did, and they went out there and they took a solid player, and it's proven time and time again that although it might not be the flashy pick, taking a solid player in the trenches, taking them in the middle of the field there, especially in the linebacker position, it's not bad. I mean,
well, most linebackers miss. It's actually the highest miss rate of all linebackers.
But linebackers do miss. But I'm talking about taking your guy. I'm not talking about taking any random guy. Is that taking the guy that fits your team? And LaFleur has been here enough years that with that amount of picks, he's gonna get at least 2 or 3 guys that are his.
And he's also probably trading out of one of them in the future, having the same benefit next year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You've got to think that sitting there at 25, that you're probably going to get. You're probably
next year's 1 and this year's 2.
you're probably going to get Philly or even Washington. Like, so this is why I say what I say. I'm going to,
Yeah, Washington might want to trade back
Washington
into
has a lot of
option
draft
someone.
capital. If they decide to go not quarterback with the second overall pick and decide to get more draft capital, this could be the situation where you potentially will have Washington trading back up in the vein that they did when they got what's his name from Auburn, Campbell, when they got Jason Campbell, is going and trading back up into the round for whatever quarterback is left if you feel the need that you have to take a quarterback. But what teams? So I'm pretty sure you told me you had this list here. What does the draft capital look like for teams, and what's the teams with the most and the teams with the least?
I just had the order. I don't have the total capital. We'll break that down the next episode.
But just to think about it, I think that when we talk about these teams, and there's a couple teams today that we haven't talked about, which we're not going to get a chance to talk about today, like Tampa, Carolina, Niners, Philly, Miami, Baltimore,
Dallas,
Cincinnati.
We go through the whole list of people we didn't talk about, but we will be talking Cowboys.
But to be honest with you, Dallas wasn't really worth talking about today because they haven't really done anything.
Well, they lost. They should have got Saquon or
they lost. They lost big because of what's been going on around them. That's 100% true. But it's nice to know that the Giants are still within their division, so that's always nice for the Dallas.
Dude, the Cowboys get 4 wins just by playing the Skins and the Giants.
Yeah, it's Commanders and Giants now.
Whatever.
So we'll get into that next week. We'll talk a little bit about the draft capital. We'll talk about some of those teams that we didn't touch on this week because it's shaping up. This free agency period has been really wild. And a lot of unexpected things have happened. A lot of teams that were supposed to do something didn't do anything. Teams that did something really that we weren't expecting. Looking at you, Pittsburgh Steelers. So you walk through it and you say, this next season, when we looked at the haves and have-nots from the previous season, there's a lot more haves this season. And if everybody stays healthy, there's a lot more teams that, although I don't think that they'll fight for a Super Bowl, I think it will be more competitive. I think Kansas City is still leaps and they got better with signing Hollywood Brown.
I think this is my key takeaway. I think the middle class, that wild card contending group of the NFC did not improve, but the ones in the AFC did.
Yeah,
with the exception of maybe Miami. But if you look at when you look at this, did the AFC North get stronger? Not really.
Yeah,
I think so. Did Cincinnati need to get stronger? They're getting Burrow back. They're better.
They're better. There's some that are addition by subtraction. I mean, and that are better by just having health. And
that's what I mean, because Cincinnati's now a playoff team because they got Burrow back.
Absolutely.
Instantly, it just happened. The Jets are getting better by Rodgers and now adding Williams.
Yeah, and the NFC North is, continues to be one of those divisions to watch. The NFC
I would argue Seattle took a step back. Dallas took a step back.
Seattle did take a step back. What did you say? The second one?
Dallas, Seattle.
Oh,
Chicago.
See, Joe, all right, final thoughts here. I don't think – I know that Dallas lost, but I'm not entirely sure that they did.
There's some argument to staying with it, but I know Chicago took a step back.
Yeah, Chicago
for this
did
calendar year. Maybe not for long term, which is their play, but for this calendar year.
Yeah, Chicago did take a step back. You're right on that. And the NFC is always weird. I mean, you look at the NFC on a year-to-year basis, the strong teams are strong, and the middle of the road guys are hovering around, that the middle pack again. And I don't think it's going to be any different from, like, if we go back and looked at, let's go back and look at the NFL.
I would argue 6 of the 8 worst teams are in the NFC right now. Cincinnati, Saints, Washington, Giants. Without even thinking, Arizona's still going to be horrible. They don't have a defense.
Okay, so looking at the AFC, New England probably not going to get any better. Chargers, maybe.
Chargers should.
Tennessee, maybe. Jets should be.
Yes.
Should be. Denver goes down. Vegas goes down. Indy should be. Jacksonville, who knows? Should be, though. Steelers gotten better. Cincinnati gotten better. Houston stayed the same, still good. Miami, who knows? Cleveland, we'll see.
Getting worse.
We'll see. They yes and no. We'll see. Buffalo, probably pretty much the same if they get a wide receiver, which they will. And Baltimore hasn't gotten worse. Yes, they Then you go and you look at the NFC. Carolina, still
worse.
You can't get much worse than 2 wins. It's still garbage though.
Touche.
Arizona, worse.
Mm-hmm.
Washington, worse. The Giants, still bad.
The Giants, significantly worse.
Atlanta, much better.
Yes.
Chicago, downgrade. Minnesota,
worse.
New Orleans, worse. Seattle, worse. Green Bay, better. Tampa, who knows? Rams, pretty much the same. Philly, pretty much the same. Detroit, pretty much the same. San Francisco, pretty much the same. And Dallas. Dallas is subtractions. If we go and we look here, we'll finish off with
We're going to go through Dallas and the Niners subtractions next week because both of them have had subtractions, and we'll go through about if either one of them should take them out of ahead of Philly for the NFC.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still under the vein that I think that Dallas. I think Dallas did what every fantasy owner wanted to do last year, which is get rid of Tony Pollard. And they finally did it after we've all been saying it for like weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. But they didn't get compensation, which kind of sucks for them. But it's been weird. It's been fun for the most part for us to see what's been going on in the changing landscape. And all of this is definitely going to affect fantasy purposes because guys, there's some guys that you were looking at in certain rounds that now
Fields went from a 6th-round pick to undraftable.
You no longer are looking at. You're looking at players whose situations have made other players' situations a lot different, like the signing of Calvin Ridley with DeAndre Hopkins. That's going to change the landscape of that 3rd, 4th round wide receiver rooms that we're trying to construct here. So there's just a lot of new things, and I think that once we come out of this draft, and also guys that we were talking about at the end of last season, as in Rishi Rice potentially being a 2nd and 3rd round pick in fantasy. Well, now there's Hollywood Brown there. He still could potentially be that talent level, get you there. But with Hollywood Brown there, now there's more mouths to feed again, when there was no mouths basically before. So there's a lot of situations that have changed.
I don't believe in Hollywood. We'll dive into that as
we'll talk about that next week too.
I do not believe in Hollywood.
I know you don't, but it's still he's still there, and it's still
he is there,
and he's not Kadarius Toney. So
is he?
He's not really. A little bit. All right, everybody. We'll catch you on the flip side.